I loved him more than life itself, trusted him with everything I had. But then I found out he was planning my replacement the whole time. His name was Daniel, and he walked into my life when I was 24, fresh out of grad school, naive, idealistic, and hopelessly romantic. I met him at a charity gala, one I was only attending because my boss forced me to network. I remember the exact moment I saw him. He was standing near the bar, wearing a deep navy suit and a tired smile. He looked like someone who had seen too much but still believed in something. And I was immediately drawn in. He had this quiet confidence, like he didn't need to speak loudly to be heard. And when he finally talked to me, his voice wrapped around me like a warm blanket. We talked all night about art, books, childhood memories, even our deepest fears. It felt like a movie, the kind where the music swells and the screen fades to black as the two souls collide. Within a week, we were inseparable. Within 3 months, we were living together. And by the end of that first year, I had completely rebuilt my life around him. I gave him everything, my time, my energy, my emotional world. I supported him through 2 failed startups, paid our rent when he couldn't, and even sold my grandmother's heirloom jewelry to help him launch his consulting firm. He said I was his anchor. He called me his miracle. For 7 years, I stood by him, through every storm, every doubt, every broken promise he made to himself. I wasn't just his partner. I was his foundation. And I never complained, not even when my friends started pulling away, saying I was disappearing inside his shadow. I didn't care. I loved him. But the thing about shadows is, they hide what you're not supposed to see. The first crack showed on our 8th anniversary. I'd spent weeks planning a surprise trip, tickets, reservations, even coordinating with his assistant so he wouldn't have meetings. But when I showed him the plane tickets to Santorini, he barely looked up from his phone. "Babe, this is sweet and all," he said, "but I've got a potential investor coming in that weekend. Can we reschedule?" It wasn't the first time he put business above us, but that day, something in me winced. Later that night, when he was asleep, I noticed he hadn't logged out of his email on the shared iPad. I wasn't trying to snoop. I swear I wasn't. But his inbox was open, and one name kept appearing. Selena. I clicked. The first email was harmless. Meeting confirmed for Thursday. Looking forward to our coffee chat. But the second chilled me. I told her I'd be working late again. She's still buying it. But once the new office is set up, we won't have to hide anymore. Just hold on. Soon, she'll be out of the picture. My hands shook. My stomach twisted. The date on that email? 6 months ago. He had been seeing her for half a year. He wasn't just cheating. He was plotting my exit while I was still folding his laundry and meal prepping his breakfast smoothies. That night, I sat in the bathroom with the shower running, sobbing into a towel so he wouldn't hear. I didn't confront him. Not yet. I needed answers first. I needed proof. And most of all, I needed a plan. Over the next week, I became someone else, a version of myself I didn't know existed. Calm, controlled, focused. I played the perfect partner while secretly copying files, taking screenshots, and forwarding emails to a hidden folder. I tracked locations, watched expense reports, even set up a camera in our shared home office. The more I dug, the darker it got. He was funneling money from our joint savings into a new business account, one that wasn't in both our names. He had already signed a lease on a downtown condo for him and her. He had registered a new LLC, listing Selena as the co-founder. And worst of all, he'd written up a separation agreement with a lawyer. He planned to break things off, offer me a small settlement, and spin a story about falling out of love. A clean exit. A polite goodbye. A neat little ending. But I wasn't going to give him one. Because now that I saw the truth, I wasn't heartbroken. I was furious. Let me tell you something about betrayal. It doesn't break you. It reveals you. And what it revealed in me was a fire I didn't know I had. I'd spent years building him up. Now it was time to watch everything he built fall. I didn't want to scream. I didn't want revenge that was messy or loud. No, I wanted precision. I wanted elegance. So I waited. For 2 more weeks, I let him think everything was fine. I kissed him goodnight. I smiled during dinners. I pretended not to notice when he spent late nights at the office. And every night, I moved one step closer to setting him up for the collapse he never saw coming. It started with the accountant. Daniel's firm was due for quarterly audits, and since I'd helped him set up the books originally, I knew where every detail lived. I anonymously tipped off the firm's investors about irregularities in the financial statements, the kind that made people nervous. Very nervous. Then I called Selena's ex. Turns out, she had a history of sabotaging partners once the money ran dry. He was more than happy to share emails, photos, and a very interesting non-disclosure violation she had once settled quietly out of court. Next, I reached out to Daniel's new landlord. I posed as his assistant and regretfully informed them that due to an error in the wire transfer, the initial lease payment would be delayed. Of course, it never came. The lease fell through. Bye-bye, new love nest. And finally, I waited for the day he tried to serve me the separation papers. I already knew it was coming. He had them couriered to my office. His handwriting was still on the envelope. He didn't even have the courage to deliver them in person. But he didn't know that I had already transferred my name off the joint accounts 2 days earlier, drained my half into a new trust account under legal advisement, and locked down the last remaining shares I held in the consulting firm, the ones I technically owned as a silent partner from the early years. When he got home that night, I was gone. So was my car, my clothes, my laptop, every trace of me. But on the kitchen counter, I left a printed copy of every email, photo, and financial document I'd collected, with a sticky note on top that read, "You said I was just in the way, so I got out of your way. Let's see how far you get without me." The day after I disappeared, Daniel called me 34 times. 34. And every voicemail was a new version of the same lie. First came the fake concern. "Hey babe, I think you forgot your phone charger and some other things. Just call me when you get this, okay? I'm worried." Then the confusion. "I don't understand what's happening. Can we talk? Please. I think there's been some misunderstanding." Then the panic. "What did you do?" "I got a call from Brian, the investor. He said something about a whistleblower and the books being off." "What did you tell him?" And finally, the rage. "You think you're clever? You just ruined everything I worked for. You spiteful, petty little." Click. That voicemail cut off mid-threat. That's the one I forwarded to my attorney. See, Daniel always thought he was the smartest man in the room, and for a long time, maybe he was. But he forgot something critical. I built him. I helped file the paperwork, draft the pitch decks, negotiate the first 3 rounds of funding. Every lie he'd crafted was built on a truth I gave him. So when I turned those truths into weapons, the entire foundation crumbled. Within 3 days of my disappearing, his accounts were flagged for investigation. Selena vanished, probably realizing the condo wasn't happening and the new empire was built on a sinking foundation. His main investor pulled out, citing ethical concerns and possible fraud. And Daniel? He was left with a company teetering on collapse and not a single person who still believed his story. But that was just the beginning. While Daniel's empire began to collapse, I reappeared, not publicly, not loudly, but deliberately. I moved into a small loft on the east side. Nothing fancy, but quiet. Peaceful. Mine. I took 2 weeks off work, just to breathe. I started therapy, cut my hair, opened a new checking account, and one by one, I reconnected with the people I had let fall away, friends, family, even my old art mentor who used to say my problem wasn't lack of talent. It was that I gave all my energy to the wrong people. I finally understood what she meant. But Daniel still wasn't done. Because men like him don't surrender. They scramble. 2 weeks after I disappeared, he showed up at my workplace. I was in the break room, getting coffee, when one of my coworkers walked in and whispered, There's some guy in a suit out front asking for you. Says he's your France? My blood turned to ice. I walked out and there he was, suit wrinkled, hair messy, desperation pouring out of him like sweat. He looked broken, smaller. Can we talk? He asked, eyes darting, trying to keep his voice low. I didn't say a word. I walked straight past him and into HR. 5 minutes later, security escorted him out. He tried again later through mutual friends. Left messages with my sister. Emailed me long, rambling apologies about mistakes and weakness and how none of it meant anything. But it did mean something. It meant everything. Because while he was rehearsing lies with Selena, I was sacrificing for him, my career, my relationships, my sense of self. He thought he could replace me like some outdated model. But what he didn't understand was that I was never the accessory. I was the architect. And he tried to steal blueprints he didn't even know how to read. 3 months after I disappeared, Daniel's company officially folded. They called it a strategic dissolution due to financial realignment, but I knew the truth. Investors had fled. The SEC had begun circling. And when they discovered Selena had been listed on expense reports under multiple pseudonyms, things unraveled fast. I didn't testify. I didn't need to. The receipts spoke for themselves. And that was the most beautiful part. I never had to scream. I never had to beg. I just left and watched everything he built without me fall apart. 6 months later, I got an email. Subject line, I miss you. Please read. I almost deleted it. But curiosity won. Inside was a long, winding apology. He admitted everything, the affair, the financial betrayal, even his plan to gradually push me out. He said he believed he could replace me, but that no one ever really made things work the way you did. He wrote, Selena didn't stay. No one did. I thought I could find better, but all I found was emptiness. I didn't reply. What do you say to someone who buried you alive and only mourned when they realized you took the oxygen with you? That email was the last thing I ever heard from Daniel. A few months later, I heard he'd moved back in with his parents, started working a sales job at a tech company he used to mock. The man who once called me his anchor had finally drifted, unmoored, directionless, and forgotten. But me? I was just getting started. It's funny how silence can be both terrifying and healing. After Daniel, my life became quiet. At first, it felt like I was walking through the ruins of something sacred, a future I had once believed in so completely now reduced to ash. But over time, that silence became something else. It became space. Space to think. Space to feel. Space to remember who I was before him. The version of me who used to dance barefoot in the kitchen at midnight. Who painted abstract chaos and called it freedom. Who once dreamed of opening a non-profit studio for at-risk youth and teaching art therapy. That version had been buried under years of compromise. But now, in the quiet, she started breathing again. It began with small things. I started painting again, at first, just to pass time. But soon, I found myself waking up early just to mix new colors. My hands remembered things my heart had forgotten. I signed up for a community art showcase. Nothing major, just a local event in a coffee shop downtown. I submitted 3 pieces under a pseudonym, and to my shock, all 3 sold. The organizer asked if I considered teaching a workshop. I said yes before I could think myself out of it. And just like that, I was coming back to life. Meanwhile, Daniel faded further into the distance. I didn't check his socials. Didn't ask mutual friends about him. I refused to orbit a world I'd already escaped. But I did hear whispers. One friend mentioned seeing him on LinkedIn trying to pitch himself as a business consultant. Another said he was spotted at a mixer, alone, drunk, trying too hard. Someone else mentioned that Selena had tried to launch a startup of her own, using Daniel's original business model. It flopped in 2 months. Karma wasn't just working. It was painting with my brush. Then, something unexpected happened. One of Daniel's old investors, a man named Alan, reached out to me directly. I remembered him from the early days. sharp, serious, but strangely kind to me even when I was just the girlfriend. His message was simple. I always knew you were the brains behind that operation. I've been following your artwork. Would you consider consulting on a community creative space we're developing? At first, I didn't know what to say, but I met with him. He offered me a lead role, not as someone's assistant, not as someone's plus one, but as a partner. It was more than a job. It was validation. Proof that I hadn't just survived Daniel, I had transcended him. Over the next year, I helped build something real. We opened a community center with an art studio, youth outreach programs, therapy sessions, and rotating exhibitions. I taught weekly classes, mentored young women, curated shows that told stories like mine. Every piece I painted sold. Every voice I lifted reminded me that my story wasn't unique, but it could be useful. Pain, when shared with purpose, becomes power. Then came the gala. 1 year to the day since I'd walked out of Daniel's life, Alan's company hosted a celebration of the new center. I wore a deep crimson dress, one I bought not to impress anyone, but because it made me feel undeniably me. I was walking through the gallery, glass of champagne in hand, when I saw him. Daniel. Standing in the back corner, alone. He looked older, not just physically, but spiritually. As if life had drained the arrogance from his bones. For a moment, our eyes met. He blinked. I didn't. I turned my head and kept walking. Later, someone told me he left 5 minutes after I passed him. He didn't say anything. Didn't make a scene. Didn't even try to follow. Maybe he realized there was nothing left to say. Or maybe he finally saw what I had become. Unreachable. But the real twist, the part that still makes me smile when the nights get quiet, came 2 months later. I was reviewing a grant proposal when an email landed in my inbox. Subject: Community Award recipient, congratulations. I thought it was a scam at first. But it wasn't. I'd been nominated and selected for a regional humanitarian award for creative outreach. And the panel included Alan and 2 former investors from Daniel's firm. The same men who once sat at conference tables ignoring my input, now clapping as I received a standing ovation in a room full of powerful people. Daniel had tried to replace me, but I had replaced myself with someone stronger, brighter, complete. The night I won that award, I sat alone on my balcony, barefoot, glass of wine in hand, staring at the city lights below. I didn't cry. I didn't gloat. I just sat there. Not because I felt nothing, but because I finally felt everything. The rage, the heartbreak, the fear, the triumph. All of it, layered like brushstrokes on the canvas of a life I almost let him steal. For years, I had tied my identity to him, to his ambitions, his goals, his approval. But now, I realized the real tragedy wasn't that he'd betrayed me. It was that I had betrayed myself by shrinking, silencing, and sacrificing the woman I was always meant to be. And now that she was back, I vowed she'd never disappear again. A few weeks later, I heard something that nearly made me laugh out loud. Daniel had started a podcast. Yes, a podcast called Rebuilding from Nothing. Apparently, it was his attempt to rebrand as some sort of redemption guru, giving life advice to men who, in his words, lost everything and came back stronger. I listened to one episode, just one. He called himself a survivor of betrayal, said he'd been manipulated and blindsided by people he trusted. He was painting himself as the victim, rewriting the script, recasting himself as the noble underdog. And I realized, he wasn't just a liar. He was delusional. I didn't get angry. I didn't threaten to expose him. I didn't even respond. Because the truth? He didn't need my help to destroy his credibility. His own words were enough. People who knew the real story, people who watched his company implode, who'd read the reports, who witnessed the lies unravel, they weren't buying it. And me? I didn't need to defend myself. Because real power doesn't scream. It stands still while the world listens. But karma, as always, was patient. Months passed. Daniel's podcast flopped. Sponsors backed out. Reviews turned brutal. One journalist even published a piece called, "When the Villain Calls Himself a Victim." He tried pivoting from redemption to dating advice. From dating advice to startup coaching. Nothing stuck. Because he had nothing left to say. No one left to imitate. The man who once tried to replace me with someone younger, prettier, more pliable, now couldn't even get people to like his posts. Meanwhile, my world kept growing. The community center expanded. We added new programs. We received another round of funding, this time with me as the face of the initiative. I was invited to speak at universities, asked to mentor young professionals, offered book deals, gallery showings, podcasts, real ones. One night, after a speaking engagement, a young woman came up to me, eyes wide, hands shaking, maybe 20, 21 at most. She said, "I was with someone who made me feel like I was lucky he loved me. He told me I was replaceable. But hearing your story reminded me that I'm not." And that's when I knew. This wasn't just revenge. It was redemption. But fate wasn't done writing. One rainy afternoon, I received a package at the community center, no return address. Inside, a small black notebook. I flipped it open. It was Daniel's. I recognized the handwriting instantly, the same tight, slanted script I once watched scribble business plans at 2 a.m. The first page read, "If anyone ever reads this, I just want it known that I didn't realize what I had until it was gone." And by then, she was already someone else. There were 20 more pages. All of them. Fragments. Regrets, apologies. Never addressed to me directly, but always about me. Part of me wanted to tear it in half. But I didn't. I slid it back in the envelope and placed it in the donation box, buried under old clothes and forgotten items. It belonged with the rest of the lost things. Later that night, I called my mother. I hadn't told her the full story before, only pieces. But now, I let her in. She cried, then said, "I never understood how you could love him so much." And I said, "Neither did I, but I understand now why I had to lose him. Because loving him taught me how much of myself I was willing to give away. And losing him taught me how much of myself I could reclaim." About a year and a half after I left him, I ran into Selena. Of all places, a grocery store. I almost didn't recognize her at first. The long, style curls were gone. Her outfit was plain. Her eyes didn't carry that smug, calculated shine anymore. She looked average, normal, forgettable. And that's when I realized she wasn't a villain. She was just a symptom of Daniel's sickness, another placeholder in a rotation of people he used, discarded, and blamed when things went wrong. I almost walked right past her. But then she looked up and saw me. Her face turned pale. "Hey," she said, her voice uncertain. I nodded. I didn't say a word. She opened her mouth again, like she wanted to apologize, to justify, to explain. But the truth was written all over her. She had lost too. Not just Daniel, but herself. Because women like Selena don't just betray other women. They betray the version of themselves that believed in respect, empathy, and dignity. And she knew it. I left her in L6. No closure. No drama. Just silence. Later that night, I pulled out a canvas. It had been months since I'd painted anything for myself. I'd been working so much, mentoring, speaking, building. I'd forgotten how much I missed it. This time, I didn't plan the piece. I didn't sketch or draft. I just poured. Every emotion, every scar, every moment of fear, of rage, of realization. Layered in oil, streaked in red and gold and black. I called it Resurrected. And when it was done, I cried. Not because I was broken, but because I was whole. A few weeks later, That painting was featured in a National Gallery exhibit about reclaiming power after betrayal. It was the centerpiece. Reviewers called it a thunderstorm of survival, the visual representation of quiet revenge. I never mentioned Daniel. I didn't need to. His absence was the loudest part of the piece. One night, after the exhibit opened, I got a message. Not from him. From his mother. We'd always had a strange relationship, distant but civil. She never interfered, never pried. But now, her message was short. I saw your name in the news. I just wanted to say, I'm proud of what you've done. I'm sorry for what he did. That was all. And somehow, it meant more than anything Daniel could have ever said. Because even she knew, I didn't just walk away. I won. Now I wake up without dread. I sip my coffee slowly. I keep my doors open. I laugh from my gut. My home is filled with canvases. My heart is filled with peace. And my past? It no longer owns me. It's just background texture in a much larger painting. Daniel? He still exists. But only as a cautionary tale. A faded sketch in a story that was never really his to begin with. Because the truth is, he thought he could replace me. He thought I was disposable. He thought I'd fall apart without him. But what he didn't know was, the woman he planned to replace was never the woman he truly had. I was already becoming someone else. Someone who wouldn't beg, wouldn't break, and would never, ever be replaced again.